Welcome to the Pzaz Filmmaker interview series. At Pzaz, we've made it our mission to help film and video makers succeed. In this series, we'll be speaking to interesting people from across the film industry. We'll gain insight into their journeys to help share their lessons with our audience.
Today's guest is filmmaker and producer Candice Delevante. Candice is a documentary filmmaker based in Brooklyn, New York. Until recently, she worked for Paramount Global on the business and legal side of scripted television. As a coordinator for the Paramount Network, she worked in the area of production, programming and development on a slate of shows developed by popular writer and showrunner Taylor Sheridan. In 2013, Candice founded Metamorphosis Pictures with the mission to champion unheard voices and unsung heroes in storytelling. So far, short documentaries and screenplays created by Metamorphosis have been showcased and awarded at festivals in the US, Canada, Mexico, Europe and Australia. Please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Candice Delevante. Candice, welcome to the Pzaz Filmmaker series. I'm really excited to be speaking to you today, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I think it's going to be a really great conversation, and I think the people watching it are going to be really interested by everything you have to say, and I think they're going to love learning about your path to being a filmmaker and what it is you do today. So, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's a great privilege, opportunity.
It's our pleasure. So for people maybe that aren't familiar with you or with your work, would you mind starting off by just introducing yourself just briefly and maybe telling people a little bit about what it is that you do today and what your current role is?
Yeah, I am a documentary filmmaker. I have been doing short documentaries over the last 10 years. So my work involves research and forming teams, finding crew, writing releases to get permission to film. It involves, all the pre-production activities, post and regular production activities that a normal filmmaker would have. Even though it's a short, there's still a lot of due diligence that has to be done before going into production in order to make production go smoothly. Prior to documentary, which I've been doing since about 2013, when I started coming back into the industry, because I had left it actually for quite a long time, and I was doing other things, and life was happening, but yes, my focus has been on documentary in the last 10 years or so, and it's I direct, I edit, I like to hire people who feel confident and who are experienced in what they're doing. And I learn from them as I become better at what I do. So I'm always looking to do better and do more, come up.
That's
higher,
interesting.
Level up.
Are there things that maybe when looking to hire other people, are there things that you would maybe look for now that you wouldn't have looked for when you were starting out? Have you learned over time that there are certain traits that are particularly valuable, or that you think really are the ones that make the difference in the filmmaking industry?
I think there needs to be a commitment to the content. So if they're really not interested in the content, if they don't really have a passion for the content, for the subject matter, I think that, if they're just in it for the paycheck, it's a little more, it can prove to be taxing on the project as a whole. We did actually have a producing partner. His name is Andrew Tao. I'm remembering we had someone who dropped out of, we were doing a proof of concept back in 2020. Yeah. And there was someone who dropped out and someone who took his place, and at the last minute, and it was a disaster. So so it's good to have people who are committed, and people who are dedicated to not just the work, but to the content, the premise.
What I think is really interesting about that is that I suppose you could have someone who's just in it for the money, so to speak. And then you could maybe have someone who loves what they do. Like, let's say, for instance, I don't know, they love writing screenplays, or they like being a director of photography. But so they might like their role, they might love their role, but then I suppose hypothetically they might still not be invested in the story or the documentary that you're telling. So do you think is it enough for them, rather than just being in it for the paycheck, to just be in it for the love of the job? Or is it important that they really believe in that story or that documentary that you're trying to tell?
The latter.
Really?
I think so. I think so. When they have more than just one foot, put both feet in. Don't just have one foot in the door. Put your whole self into the project. And I think that you come up with better results, I think, from talent and crew.
When I was doing some research on you for this interview, one of the things that I found that I really admire about you is that you've worked in the creative industry for a long time. Like I think if I'm correct, you worked at Paramount Global for more than a decade. And I really respect people who are able to not just work in the creative profession, but are able to make a living at it and to, sort of make it their day job. So what was it like working for a company like Paramount? And if you don't mind me asking, what was it that made you decide to, sort of strike out on your own and set up your own company?
Well, I worked with a great team. Business and legal affairs taught me a lot about the business of television, right? And I worked with a great team of lawyers who were so good at what they did and so dedicated, not just to the work, but to each other. Very professional and lovely. And I loved the brand. I was a fan, The job itself has its own limitations. At some point you have to. There were personal and professional reasons why I had stepped down in January, but I have walked away with great experience. Having worked on some fantastic shows by Taylor Sheridan. He's a great screenwriter. And then I, decided that it was time to start working on my own and looking for freelance opportunities. So it's going to be a mix. It's going to be a combination. I'm going to find my tribe, and so to speak. So this was the business side of production and programming and development, and now I'm developing and pitching my own projects, and hopefully I'll develop my own tribe.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I think a lot of people watching this would hear the name Taylor Sheridan and they think maybe of something like Yellowstone, which is proven to be incredibly popular. And I think they'd be really impressed to know that you worked with someone that was attached to such a popular, a popular brand, popular story. I'm curious, and I hope you don't mind me asking, why do you think now was the right time to sort of go and become freelance? Was there a particular series of events that led up to that, or was it something that had just been building naturally and it just seemed like a natural step?
Naturally. Well, it's a bit of both. There were some things I can't really discuss under contract, and I didn't work with Taylor directly. I just want to be clear. I worked with the team, the legal team that handled, that represented him as showrunner of his slate of shows. So there are certain things that decisions that I had to make come the end of last year, and that had, kind of prompted me to step down. I think that it's a great timing. Right now, documentaries have been on the rise in terms of viewership.
Yeah.
I think people have been a little bit disenchanted with the corporate controlled news media, if I may say so. They've been disenchanted with what they're seeing. They've been diving into documentaries because it gives them a more in-depth look at a subject.
Yeah, and it actually, you're right. I agree with you completely. I think that documentary as a genre has a very good reputation with most people. I think for being perceived as authentic and maybe not having not as much of an ulterior motive as, as you say, a lot of news media, which tends to be, sort of quite closely controlled by corporate interests. I think documentary is a genre that people still look at and they think, oh well, if somebody produces a well researched, well made documentary, I'm probably more likely to be getting something closer to, objective truth with that.
Yes, but you could also be getting the documentarian's point of view. So Michael Moore, for example, right?
Yeah.
He is a gloves off kind of filmmaker. I mean, calls out the establishment, and I appreciate that. I mean, that's how I approached my very first short doc. Sometimes you have to be aggressive and ruthless, with the truth, and you want people to see, what's underneath the surface.
Yes. Yeah.
So there are definitely points of view from the filmmaker that can, seem manipulative in a sense, one-sided, one-dimensional. In that regard, it's is it truth telling? Yes, but you're not presenting both sides of the story.
Is that important to you when you're sort of focusing on your work that you produce? What do you keep in mind in terms of, like, do you have a code or a set of principles that you tend to adhere to in your own work?
To be transparent, honor the subject's boundaries. Those are some of the values. To do the research, to fact check. Is it important to me to show both sides? Not necessarily. It depends on what it is. So my first short had to do with the 2008 recession as it related to the Wells Fargo and their role in foreclosure crisis.
Yeah.
That was very point of view, legalistic, here's their playbook, which an attorney furnished me with. They actually had a playbook.
Wow.
Yeah. And here's their playbook, and, here's, action and result.
Yeah.
It was very matter of fact, very scrappy, but because it was my first, I had, don't have a lot of resources doing these short docs, but, I got my point across. It screened in Ohio, of all places, during the 2016 presidential elections.
Oh, wow.
That was shocking. I said to myself, well, that's, I guess I got my point across.
Yeah, I guess so.
So that was a win for me, a small win, but I appreciated that very much. These small festivals, a lot of people focus on the big, the large ones, the Sundances, the Clermont-Ferrands, Palm Springs. But, these smaller niche festivals are the ones that have taught me a lot, and I've been able to network and to, learn from my mistakes and receive some nominations and awards along the way. But the most important thing, I think, is the engagement. Is it making an impact? Are people talking about it? Is it something that people are walking away from and talking about, when they leave the theater?
I suppose that
or their laptop.
If you're at a festival, then I imagine it's probably easier to gauge that in real time, because you can speak to people after a screening, or you can talk to people at the festival and hear what people are talking about, what films have really caught people's attention. It sounds like you can really have your finger on the pulse, I suppose, of how people are feeling about, works. Yeah.
Yes, I actually would like to offer Nkosi to anyone who's watching, who's part of a community group or an advocacy group, an organization. I'm happy to show them or give them the link to my last short documentary if they'd like to have if they're interested in the issue of mass incarceration in the United States.
Well, thank you. We'll certainly put any links that you want in the notes that accompany the show. So, whether it's for Cozy Eclipsed, which is one of Candice's recent documentaries, which I think came out in 2020, or some of her other works, we can definitely put those links there so that people can get access to everything that you want them to see. So one of the things I also admire about what you've produced so far is that it seems, well, political is not the right word, because I think political is too trite a word. I think the work that you're doing is very relevant and important and urgent. I think I think your work contains messages I think it's really important for people to see and to hear, in the world today. Is there any particular, is there anything that you've learned from your documentaries that really surprised you along the way, or maybe where you've been forced to see things a bit differently when you've, sort of looked into a situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, because sometimes you think the documentary is going to be one thing and it kind of takes off and goes in another direction.
Oh, really? That must be quite
It
challenging.
can happen. Something can unfold that you didn't expect. Right. And then it's,
I don't think people expect that. I'm guessing anyway that most people, when they think about documentary filmmaking, they imagine someone goes into it knowing what they're going to say, broadly speaking, and then maybe they make this film or this production which it enlarges on the details and expands upon it. But I don't think that most filmmakers would expect that they'd really come out of it seeing things totally differently. So I'm just curious whether you can think of whether there are any examples where that's happened to you.
Well, so to your point, it is important to have a clear intention. And what I guess I'm trying to say, Tom, is sometimes that there are circumstances that come up that could open the door to a new perspective. New information could come up. I'm trying to think of an instance, not in my own work. I'd have to get back to you on that.
That's totally fine. I think it's a difficult question. What I think is, I just think it's great though that it's one of the functions of documentary filmmaking to, I think if someone's done their job properly, then the audience goes in maybe thinking one way, and maybe they don't come out having completely changed their opinion 180 degrees, but they certainly come out thinking about things a different way, or they've got a different perspective on things. So for me, I think it's a very interesting genre. Like, what? Maybe I'll ask a different question. What is it that drew you to documentaries and filmmaking in the first place? Was there some particular, desire to produce
inciting incident?
Maybe, maybe an inciting incident, or maybe I don't know, something just changed for you and opened that door. I'm curious.
I did the first documentary called "Go Quietly," which which occurred when I started recording in real time my experience with Wells Fargo, and in which they were foreclosing on homes without any, in some cases, without any legal right to do so.
Wow.
They've been fined by the billions of dollars by now. But back then, the homeowners were being vilified. And I was calling out the bank and saying, my home's not underwater. Here's what they're doing. An attorney helped me out, gave me their playbook, which I displayed in the documentary. Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, they were the archival footage from them, they helped me out, gave me permission to use some of their footage for the documentary. And it was my first step into documentary, and it was the trigger, the catalyst. Well, Fargo was the catalyst. So that's what, after having been out of the business, I was kind of not expecting to return. But that was such a pivotal moment for me. when your livelihood is at stake.
It really did sound like your own inciting incident, really, didn't it? Things weren't the same afterwards.
Yeah.
You'd crossed the threshold.
Yeah, I had to start all over again.
Yes, wow. And for someone who is maybe not established like yourself, but is maybe wanting to start out as a filmmaker, and maybe they want to make documentaries, or maybe they want to make something else. What advice would you give them on how to get started, or is there anything that you think is particularly important for them to keep in mind?
Networking, building a community of people who share your values and your dreams, and give, don't just take, but give back.
Why are those things so important? What's crucial about them?
The business is made up of relationships, and it's important to be a good collaborator, good listener, to offer to help, to not just receive help, but to offer. And also, I would say, if you're doing documentary or for any genre, you have to get permission to use footage. You have to get permission to use music. You have to get permission to use someone's name, likeness, and voice. You have to get permission.
Yeah.
Even if you think it's going to end up on a shelf somewhere, you never know when someone might want to screen it. Vimeo actually contacted me last week after having done Nkosi 4 years ago and said, your trailer has music that we are wondering if it's copyrighted. If you have permission to use that music on your trailer.
It must have been a bit of a box out of the blue.
You have 48 hours to produce evidence that you have permission, or if it's in the public domain. Otherwise, we're going to take it down. Yes, 4 years.
These things do matter.
Oh yes. So I keep track of all of that. So I was able to give them evidence of it was a public domain off YouTube audio library, but it was able to produce that with them right away. So
that's good. So
yeah, very, very important to get permissions.
You mentioned Nkosi Eclipsed before, and I was reading I think another interview that you gave about that, and I believe you said that partly occurred because of a chance encounter with someone. So I think you were talking to someone about sort of physical exercise and yoga in prisons.
Oh yes.
And then you bumped into someone, or someone that you knew.
Yeah.
Knew someone who actually conducted yoga classes in prisons, which I thought was a great story, because it just sounds like one of those meant to be moments where you meet the right person at the right time. And I was just wondering, do you think that element of luck and that serendipity, do you think that's a big part of filmmaking, or is it common to all creative professions? And yeah, what do you think about that?
I think when you follow your heart, and you convey, what it is that you want, those things will come to you. And that was, serendipitous indeed. That was Tamara Daly, and I will be getting together with her next week, and at a screening, and at a screening back in 2019, I walked up to her and said hello, and I said, I'd like to do a prison yoga documentary. I was reading this article, and it sounds very great method of rehabilitation. I'd like to explore. I know someone who teaches it, who taught it.
Just like that.
Here, I'll give you his, it was just,
It's funny, isn't it?
It just happened like that in a moment.
Yeah, and I think you have a point. Like, moments they can feel like the universe is conspiring to help you with an endeavor or with a project like that. It can feel sort of fated, arranged sometimes in a nice way.
Yes, I think it's the prison yoga is a great rehabilitative tool, and it's I don't think there's enough of that in the prison system. They're really not helping the prisoners. It's a for-profit system.
Yeah.
And of course, as you know, we have the highest incarceration rate in the world, and they're being exploited. So, yoga, they need even more than yoga, but for the sake of this discussion, yes, the yoga was a great topic to discuss without being didactic, right? So just going back to your other question, yeah, I didn't want my last documentary to be a teaching tool, something that sent a message. I just allowed Nkosi to give his story,
Right.
to tell his story.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. So is that an important part of filmmaking for you, is maybe making a feature that just allows someone to speak and be heard without necessarily following someone else's agenda or sticking to a script, so to speak?
Yeah, it was for my last short, and as I research my next subject for a potential feature, it will be all just historical archival footage and interviews and woven in with narration. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to flesh out, but still working on it. It's very, very early, but it will have no. My opinion is, I'm hands off as far as trying to weave any kind of opinion into the narrative. It's just going to stand on its own merit.
That makes sense. Thank you. So one of the things that comes through to me with filmmaking, researching these interviews, is that the internet and technology now is proceeding so fast that I guess in a way the barrier to entry has never been lower for people who want to get into the industry, because what was once, let's say at one time you had to have access to a professional tool which would cost thousands of dollars, or professional equipment, and now so much equipment is available on the internet or for free or using AI. And someone else I've interviewed has said that that's lowered the barrier, it's leveled the playing field. But I also think in a way it makes it even harder now for people to stand out from the crowd and to differentiate themselves. So if someone is trying to get into the field, or maybe is starting out, how do you suggest that someone stands out from a crowd, or maybe sets themselves apart from others? Maybe that could be something that you did, or maybe something that maybe you didn't do, but that you think is now more important than it was, earlier on.
I guess finding material that is finding these extraordinary people who have, finding ordinary people who have extraordinary stories is something that fascinates me. People who are everyday people who have accomplished amazing things in their lifetime. Those are stories that attract me, and there are a lot of, we have several billion of us on the planet, and there are a lot of stories to tell. Just to have to dig for that gold, find that story that really stands out, and stay true to it. Integrity, I think, is important. Staying true to the material.
What do you think makes that gold for most people? I think that there must be, I guess maybe the reason why documentaries and films resonate with people is they have, like you say, they have that something, it might be a quote ordinary person that does something extraordinary. What do you think it is that people respond to when they're watching a documentary about somebody else?
One of the things that comes to mind is when someone is relatable, when they come from perhaps very humble beginnings. They're a homeowner. And so in the case of Sandra Hines, who was in the Robocon, my second short, she, was held at gunpoint by police officers as they were, emptying out her house in Detroit. And she flew down to Congress as soon as she could get a chance, forgot her glasses, had a speech written, she was beside herself. She forgot her glasses and had to, deliver her own speech in front of Congress to talk about how this has affected her life, this home of her family's, which was for over 40 years, how it affected her psyche, her family's life, their livelihoods. I think that's something that people can relate to.
Yeah.
If you watch American Factory, those are people in Dayton, Ohio, who lost their jobs. I think it was about 2,000 families who lost their jobs. And then a Chinese manufacturer comes in and, revives the town by buying the factory and giving them their jobs. That's an extraordinary, story. And then they have to work together, two cultures working together, to revive a town. That's extraordinary. I love that.
I think it in a way, it's compelling when you see or hear people doing extraordinary things, or doing things that we maybe admire, or things that we would like to imagine ourselves doing. Maybe I think we probably listen to those people or see those people and we think, well, that's someone to look up to, or that's something that I like to think I could do, or I would do in the same circumstances, I guess.
And you can. If I were to attach a brand to my persona, it would be empowerment. I want people to feel like they can do something about it, even if they're having a discussion, or if they want to take it a step further and organize in their community. I think empowerment is something that's essential, when people don't have to sit back and say, well, that was a great story. Sorry, there's nothing I can do. But
on to the next, what's on next.
Yeah. Where they can do if they want.
Yeah, it stays with them. Is that when you started Metamorphosis, did you have it sounds a bit cheesy to say a mission statement or a vision, or do you have a sort of mission in mind when you think about what projects to take on, or if you're telling people about the company?
Yeah, Metamorphosis Pictures was formed 10 years ago with the intention to tell stories about unsung heroes. People, ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Yeah.
People who are relatable.
Yeah.
People who are relatable. People that are not. The news carries a lot of bad news, right? We hear a lot of bad news about robberies and whatnot.
Definitely.
So it's kind of like a little bit too much attention being paid on the criminal. I kind of wanted to bring in something of value that celebrates the vigilante, the warrior.
Yeah.
Maybe
the underdog as well, like
the underdog
who conquers against the odds, I suppose. But who is someone just like you or me, someone who's
they should be relatable. That's what the audience wants to connect. Why should I care?
Yeah. Well, Candice, this has been fantastic. I think we're coming up on the end of the time for the interview, but I just want to say thank you, because I've found this absolutely fascinating to learn more about.
This was a wonderful opportunity for me. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm sure that people who watch it are going to get a lot out of it. And for anyone who wants to learn more about Candice's work and the work that Metamorphosis Pictures is doing, we're going to put links in the notes along with this video to their website and to places where you can see specific works that Metamorphosis has produced. I think Nkosi Eclipsed came out in 2020, and there'll be more recent, even more exciting projects on the horizon very soon, I'm sure. So make sure that if you're watching this, you go and check them out.
Thank you.
But Candice, I just want to say thank you again. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for having me, Tom. It was great chatting. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed watching today's interview. This video is part of the Filmmaker interview series from Pzaz. At Pzaz, we're building a production ecosystem that helps you to get things done. To try it for free, visit pzaz.io today. Thanks for watching.